Sverdlovsk, May 1st, 1960. The U-2 trembled against the thin air. Its silver wings stretched over 70,000 feet of sky. Francis Gary Powers had flown this bird countless times, but this morning felt different. The Soviets had been sharpening their teeth. It's story time. This story is called The Man Who Fell from the Sky. There was a flash, and then the world convulsed. The missile didn't strike clean. It ripped the air into chaos. The aircraft lurched into a flat spin, nose over tail. The harness crushed his chest. Powers' gloved hand shot for the ejection controls. Nothing. The centrifugal force pinned him like a vice. Damn it! Come on! The seatbelt clinched across his lap, locking him in place. He clawed for the knife strapped to his suit, meant for exactly this nightmare. His fingers brushed the handle. It was too far. Every second bled away his chance to reach the self-destruct panel, the one that could have reduced the cameras and film to ash. The spin deepened. Alarms shrieked. He knew he only had seconds, not minutes. He pulled the canopy release. The rush of air tore at him, dragging him from the cockpit's coffin. For a heartbeat, he thought he was free. Then, the parachute snapped open, and the Soviet Earth surged upward. Somewhere behind him, the wreckage of his U-2 scattered across the Urals. Secrets intact. Moscow, 1960 through 1962. Prison walls. Cold stone. Show trials. Powers endured 21 months of Soviet interrogation, propaganda, and suspicion. They paraded him through courtrooms. They filmed his words, made him a symbol. The world argued over whether he was a spy, a hero, or a fool. But the Soviets hadn't broken him. He gave them very little, what they already knew, what survival demanded, and nothing more. And then, one gray morning in Berlin, on the Glenecke Bridge, he was traded for Rudolf Abel, the Soviet spy who had lived in Brooklyn under another man's name. Freedom for Powers came not with fanfare, but with the nervous glances of men who wondered if he'd talked too much. Langley, February 1962. The room was small, sealed from the world. A single lamp burned on the desk, throwing shadows across the two men. On one side sat Powers, thinner than when he had left, his eyes hollow from captivity. On the other side, a man who did not waste words, Lieutenant Colonel Roth, intelligence officer, interrogator, and keeper of truths that would never see daylight. "Let's begin," Roth said quietly. Powers spoke haltingly at first, then with growing clarity. He described the mission path, the missile, and the violent spin. Roth listened without interruption, his pen moving in precise strokes across the page. "When you realized you'd been hit," Roth asked, "what steps did you take?" "I went for the self-destruct, sir. I couldn't reach it." "Why not?" Powers' jaw clenched. "The harness pinned me down. My lap belt locked. I tried to cut free. I couldn't reach the knife. I was stuck. The spin forced me back into the seat." Roth noted it carefully. Subject states harness prevented access to blade and destruct switch. "And the cameras?" "The cameras were still intact when I bailed out, sir. I had no way to destroy them." The silence stretched. For the first time, Powers raised his eyes. "I know what they'll say, sir. That I failed. That I should have done more." Roth studied him, weighing every twitch of expression. He had interrogated men broken by fear. Men who had invented stories to shield themselves. Powers was not lying. He was burdened by survival, by a decision he never had time to make. In his report, Roth would later write, "No indication of collaboration. Subject followed protocol in the limit of physical possibility. Survival ensured eventual recovery of intelligence." At last, Roth closed his notebook. He pushed a cigarette across the table. You did what you could, more than most would have in that seat. For a moment, Power's hands trembled as he lit the match. In the glow, Roth saw not a traitor, not a failure, but a man who was caught in history's gears, and was still breathing. Outside that windowless room, the Cold War groaned on. Presidents postured, premiers thundered, spies traded places in the shadows. The U-2 incident would remain a scar on American pride, a story of betrayal to some, and a story of endurance to others. But in Roth's classified file, one detail stood apart, written in clean ink. Pilot was caught in the seatbelt, could not reach knife, could not reach self-destruct. Sometimes, history hinges not on betrayals or secrets, but on a single strap of webbing, a few inches of reach denied, and on the men who lived long enough to explain why. The Debrief, Langley, February 1962. The lamp hummed faintly. Its light focused on two men separated by a scarred oak desk. On one side sat Francis Gary Powers, gaunt and hollow-eyed from the 21 months in Soviet custody. Again on the other side sat Lieutenant Colonel Roth, his pen poised above a black leather notebook, face unreadable. The recorder clicked on. Roth leaned forward. His voice was calm and practiced. Mr. Powers, start from the moment of impact. Powers drew in a slow breath, his shoulders tense. The missile detonated a foot of the fuselage, sir. I felt a shudder. Then the aircraft rolled into a flat spin. It was violent and uncontrollable. Roth's pen moved silently. And your immediate response? I attempted to eject, sir. Power's voice cracked slightly, but steadied. The lap belt. The lap belt locked. The centrifugal force pressed me into the seat. I reached for my knife, and I couldn't get to it. Roth's eyes narrowed. Show me. Yes, sir. Powers raised his hand, mimicking the movement. His fingers strained towards his right hip. The handle was here. I could feel the edge of it, but every time I stretched, the spin just forced me back. I couldn't cut the belt, and I couldn't reach the destruct panel. Roth let silence fill the space. He had learned that silence extracted more than questions. Powers' hands trembled, then stilled on the tabletop. I know what they think, sir, Powers muttered. They think that I failed, that I left the cameras intact, but I swear to you, Colonel, I had seconds, only seconds. Roth's pen paused mid-stroke. His tone was firm, but not unkind. You're saying the equipment remained undestroyed at bailout? Yes, sir. And once clear of the aircraft? There was no chance, sir, Powers said. I was under a chute. I could only watch it fall apart, pieces scattered across the Urals. He swallowed hard. I had no control. Roth studied him, weighing his every gesture, every word. Then softly, and the suicide device? Powers' eyes flicked up, shadowed. The pin was in the coin, yes, sir. I thought about it. But if I used it, they'd have proof we were ordered to die rather than be captured. That propaganda would have been worse than my trial. I figured better to survive, better to tell the truth here. The lamps lit carved sharp lines across Roth's face. He wrote deliberately, then closed the notebook with a snap. For the record, Roth said, his voice measured, you were caught in the seat harness. Physical restriction prevented access to both the knife and the destruct panel. Subject did not willfully abandon protocol. Powers blinked, as if he was surprised. You believe me, sir? Roth's gaze was steady and unwavering. It isn't about belief. It's about fact. And the fact is, you returned alive, uncompromised, and that is service enough. The tape clicked off. Roth gathered his files, then stopped at the door. You carried the weight of a nation at 70,000 feet, Powers. You walked back into this room, and that means you didn't break. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. The door closed. Alone, Powers lit a cigarette with unsteady fingers, the smoke curling like a sigh of fragile relief. Debriefing continued. The door sealed shut behind him with a metallic click. Francis Gary Powers sat alone in the small room, shoulders hunched, fingers tracing an invisible line across the tabletop. The hum of the overhead lamp gnawed at the silence until the door opened again. Lieutenant Colonel Roth stepped in. Crisp uniform, black notebook tucked under one arm. His expression betrayed nothing, not suspicion, not sympathy, just the trained neutrality of a man who had built a career listening for cracks in the strongest walls. Mr. Powers. Roth's voice was low, deliberate. Colonel. The tape recorder clicked on. From impact to bailout, Roth began. Minute by minute, leave nothing out. Powers' eyes clouded, the memory vivid as shrapnel. The missile detonated. The plane bucked into a flat spin. The harness pinned me tight. My lap belt cinched. I reached for the knife. His hand twitched at his thigh, muscle memory returning. I couldn't reach it. I couldn't cut myself free. And the destruct panel. It was out of reach, sir. The spin pressed me back. And then I blacked out before I could even try again. Roth's pen scratching across the page. His voice carried no inflection when he asked. So the cameras remained intact? Yes, sir. I had seconds. I couldn't... Powers stopped himself, jaw tightening. I know how this looks. But again, I swear to you, Colonel, I had no chance. Roth said nothing. He let the silence thicken until Powers' voice cracked against it. And I know what they're saying. They're saying I failed, that I left secrets in Soviet hands. But you have to believe me. You have to believe the facts. Belief again is irrelevant, Roth cut in. Facts are all that matter here. The session ended after 4 hours. Powers left the room looking older than when he had entered it. Roth stayed behind. He wrote in his notebook. Subject states harness failure prevented destruction of classified equipment. Behavior is consistent. No signs of fabrication. The next morning, Powers sat with a cigarette trembling between his fingers. Roth sat across from him. Tell me about your captivity. Powers exhaled. They worked me in shifts, sir. Interrogators, translators, psychologists. The same questions over and over. My altitude, camera specs, mission routes. I gave them what they already knew, and nothing else. Roth watched carefully. Methods? Sleep deprivation, bright lights, threats against my wife and family. They'd switch tactics. Friendly one day, brutal the next. They wanted me to slip. Did you? No, sir. Powers' voice was steel. Not once. I knew the line, and I held it. Roth noted the detail. Psychological pressure consistent with KGB practices. Subject claims resistance maintained. They paraded me through a show trial, Powers continued. They gave me a lawyer who couldn't defend me. There were cameras everywhere. I was the villain in their theater. And you played your role? Roth said evenly. What choice did I have, sir? The fourth session came after dawn the next day. Roth was already at the table when Powers entered. No greeting this time. The coin, Mr. Powers, Roth said flatly. Why didn't you use it? Powers shifted, his voice steady but softer. Because my death would have been a greater gift to them than my capture. Imagine Khrushchev waving the silver dollar in front of the world, claiming we sent men to die on command. They'd paint us as monsters. Better I survive. Better I come back and talk to you. Roth's pen hovered above the page. Slowly he nodded. Subject rationale. Suicide not employed to deny Soviet propaganda leverage. Strategic reasoning plausible. You don't think I was a coward, sir? Powers asked suddenly. Roth's gaze met his, unwavering. Cowards do not sit in this chair after 21 months in a Soviet cell. For the first time, the air in the room shifted. The interrogator was no longer a judge. He was an ally. The fifth day carried a darker edge. Roth closed the door behind him. Did you ever suspect the Soviets knew you were coming? Powers blinked. What do you mean, sir? They had surface-to-air assets in position. The missile hit with uncanny precision. Too precise, some say, for chance. Roth leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Did it occur to you there may be a leak within the program? Powers hesitated. I thought about it. Up there. As the alarm screamed, I wondered how they found me so quickly. But I had no proof. Roth's pen wrote faster now, sharp lines cutting across the page. Possibility of compromise within U-2 program. Subject cannot confirm, but suspected heightened readiness by Soviet defenses. Roth closed the notebook, his expression unreadable. This stays in this room. Powers nodded grimly. Yes, sir. By the sixth day, the pilot looked less like a suspect and more like a survivor. Roth knew the whispers in Washington wouldn't vanish. Some men would always accuse Powers of weakness, but Roth's notes would stand at the official record, precise, clinical, and unyielding. The last words of the debrief were spoken quietly, not for the tape, but for the man. Again, you carried a nation 70,000 feet, Roth said. And you carried yourself through 21 months in their hands. That's not failure, Powers. That's endurance. Powers' eyes met his, tired but grateful. For the first time since he'd been back, the pilot allowed himself to breathe without shame. Classified CIA internal debrief report summary. Subject, Francis Gary Powers. Interrogator, LTC Roth. Date, February 11th through the 15th, 1962. Subject, consistent across multiple sessions. Harnessed entanglement prevented destruction of classified equipment. No credible evidence of collaboration. Subject provided only information already known to Soviets under duress. Suicide device not employed. Reasoning based on strategic propaganda considerations. Subject reports Soviet use of psychological pressure and show trials. Subject raises suspicion of possible intelligence leak within U-2 program due to rapid Soviet response. No direct proof. Overall assessment. The subject acted within operational constraints. Conduct deemed honorable under extreme circumstances. Filed, LTC, Roth. Classified internal debrief. This story is a work of historical fiction inspired by real Cold War events, including the 1960s U-2 incident involving CIA pilot Francis Gary Powers. Certain historical figures, organizations, locations, and operations depicted in this narrative are based on publicly known events, as well as personal family service records connected to Lieutenant Colonel Roth. While portions of the story draw from documented history and reported details, many scenes, conversations, thoughts, characters, and interactions, as well as classified elements, have been dramatized, constructed for narrative purposes. Dialogue, internal reflections, and certain operational details are imagined interpretations intended to create an immersive storytelling experience and should not be considered verified historical record. This story is not presented as an official government account, declassified intelligence document, or factual transcript. Any resemblance between fictionalized elements and actual classified material is speculative and it's intended solely for creative and literary expressions. The story is meant to explore the human tension, psychological pressure, and moral complexity surrounding espionage and the Cold War intelligence operations. I hope you enjoyed the story. I'll see you next time.